Determine appropriate sampling methods. We're going to talk about 5 basic sampling methods in this video. We're going to start with a simple random sample, cluster sampling, stratified sampling, systematic sampling, and end with convenient sampling. Well, let's jump right in. Simple random sampling is exactly what it sounds like, where all members of the population have an equal chance of being a part of the sample. So whether we're talking about an individual, we're talking about everybody having a phone number, whatever, everybody has an equal shot. For an example, research obtains cell phone numbers and randomly select numbers to call and survey. Now with the randomly selecting, a lot of times they'll use like a number generator. So everyone will have a number assigned to them and they use a random number generator to decide which numbers they're actually going to call. Now the problems with this, in this particular example, not everyone has a landline. Some people are on do not call lists. People don't always answer their phones. And if you're trying to call and survey people, well, you're only going to talk to those who answer their phone. And if they don't hang up on you, so you might get a disproportionate number of maybe old people who are lonely and will talk to anyone. That's me being a little biased there, but I only answer my phone for random numbers during the workday. So if they call in the evening, I don't answer that. So it really kind of depends when you're dealing with simple random sampling. You're getting a random sample of options, but that doesn't mean that your sample is a good proportion of who you're actually trying to talk to. So not always the best. Let's go to cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is when we divide the population into groups and then randomly select several of those groups and include everyone in the selected groups. Now we use this if we can't get everywhere. So we're like, okay, we cannot get everywhere. So let's divvy people up and then we'll talk to groups that we can actually get to. For an example, there's a lot of flights, right? Airplanes that fly every day. So we're going to randomly pick 6 flights from the same day, and we're going to survey every passenger on those 6 flights. So if there's 120 passengers on the plane, we talk to all 120, but we're only talking to 6 flights. Now, this is a lot easier than some because we're clustering our people together, as you will. But the problem is that you might really have a lot of biased results, because if you think about what plane is flying out of Indianapolis, one of the 6. Okay, so we're talking to the people in Indianapolis. Well, they're not from the South. So if it's something that deals with the South, what if all 6 of your flights are from the North or are from Eastern Standard Time or are in the Midwest or whatever? You could have very biased results because all of these people are in the same general area, right? So we could have over or underrepresented groups based on where these clusters are coming from. So that's a little bit of an issue there with cluster sampling. Stratified sampling is similar to cluster in that we're dividing people into groups, but with stratified sampling, we're dividing them into naturally occurring groups. So maybe by like eye color, blue-eyed people, brown-eyed people, hazel eyes, whatever. So they're naturally occurring, or people who live on numbered streets versus lettered streets versus named streets, naturally occurring things. We call these naturally occurring groups strata. Then we survey a few people from each group, right? So from each strata. And this ensures that we have all groups represented so that hopefully we stay away from that over or under representation because we're talking to a few from each. For example, a school wants to do a survey to find out the feelings about the mascot name among students. 3 students from each homeroom are surveyed. All right, so if you think about a high school or whatever school, doesn't really matter. Usually schools have a homeroom, right? Students start in a particular classroom, and these are naturally occurring groups. So the strata would be each one of these homerooms, and then they survey 3 people from each homeroom. More than likely, homerooms are by grade, so the same basic age of students, and hopefully we get a decent representation of students in that school by surveying 3 from each homeroom. This is a pretty good way. If you can do it, stratified sampling is a pretty good way. Systematic sampling is when we Use a system. So we sample every 8th person from the population. So that might mean every 5th, every 10th, every 25th. It depends on how big is your population to choose from, how much time do you have, where are you getting these people from, on what value of K, right? How often do we need to talk to somebody to get the sample size that we want? So for example, you call every 15th number in the phone book to survey about voting ideals, right? So every 15th. Now, the problems, this could lead to bias. If there's a pattern in the population, you don't know that ahead of time, right? If you're talking to every 15th person, maybe every 15th person is named Sam and they all have the same feelings. I mean, you don't know. But you really don't know what kind of representation you are getting with this. So again, you could be over or under representing certain groups because you're just talking to every 15th person. You also may need to adjust the value of K depending on what the goal sample is, as I mentioned earlier. If your goal is to talk to 100 people, but every 15th and you keep getting shut down, you may need to call more to get the sample size you need. So that's just something to keep in mind with systematic sampling. And then the last one of convenience sampling, this is simply talking to people who are easily accessible. This is obviously not the best way to go about a sample. So example, I stand outside a pizza parlor and I ask people their favorite food as they enter. Generally, convenience sampling is very biased because it's easily accessible people. Generally, you're getting a biased sample. You're not getting a good representation, right? If you're at a pizza parlor and you're asking people their favorite food, what do you think they're probably going to say, right? A good portion of them will probably say pizza because that's what they're about to eat. So you're definitely getting a biased sample, not a good representation. Try to avoid convenience sampling at all costs. So that's a good representation of the 5 most common sampling. Hope that helps you figure out what you need.